Microphone check 1 2 1 2. I should have probably done that before I turned, but then I can't really. You know what? Now's not the time. 2 3 4. Something do ba dee da da. Dee 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 do do. Ba da ba 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 ba. It's Wednesday. It was pointed out to me just recently that I've completely lost the thread of that Cure song. So I'm going to have to listen to it again before next week. I'm sure I will forget. But I have not forgotten picks of the week. So, this little tidbit came to me. As you're all aware, every year around this time, I do an extensive market research and, test audiences and blah, 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 and all kinds of screenings and everything else. And we spent all week crunching the numbers, and well, basically I've gotten completely off the rails with this here comic book roundup. I think initially, I can go off on this as a bird walk to start, just to get my voice warmed up. This little video project began as a promotional tool for San Diego Comics, which is RIP, no longer with us. This was back in 2018 when I was still working. No, 2019 when I was still I'm trying to think now when I quit. No, I quit in 2018. That's right. Gosh, that's weird because that means I didn't do it at all in 2019. So I did it for a few months for the shop's Facebook page and social media and stuff, and it was fun. It was it was a little lark to do once a week, and I would try to keep it at 10 minutes because it wasn't just supposed to be me indulging myself, which is what it's most assuredly become. I quit that gig in late 2018, and then a year later, I started doing this one. I think the first day of 2020 was the first one of these that I did. I hope that's right, because I'm going to feel like a right tit otherwise. And I still was trying to keep it to 10 minutes, and then very quickly would let it go over, but still try to keep it reasonable. And then I stopped doing my music podcast, and so this became like a weekly, me yammering into a microphone. The same microphone that I used to record my podcast, or at least the last couple months worth of it. And still just trying to be fun. And then, during quarantine, I was trying to promote the shop. I'm sure that really worked. And what it has become is just me talking to myself. I watch these. I record them. I let a few months go by. I go back and I watch them again. And I go, boy, I sure like what this guy has to say about funny books. It's all stuff that I've thought myself. I mean, it's guaranteed audience. But yeah, my friends who aren't as into comics as I am will tune in every now and again. Hello. And my friend Alexander told me this last week that he has no idea what I'm talking about anymore. So I'm going to try and rein it in a hair. At least, try to talk about it more as though you don't know what I'm talking about, which I should just do anyway. I also think it's because, I've been doing this for, Jesus, that means I've been doing this for 2 years now? That doesn't seem possible. I've run out of things to say in a lot of ways. This is something too that, as much as I love comics, there only is so much to say. I used to do, this was like over a decade ago, I did a monthly blog about comics called Attention Children Sequential Art, which is still one of my favorite titles of something I've come up with. And then we shortened it to Attention Children. Same thing happened there. After like a year or so, I was like, I don't have anything to really add to what I've already said. That blog was more trying to take one subject and write an extended sort of essay on it. So it's not exactly the same thing. But so here, going forward, Wednesday I'm in love. Also, I think going forward, I should be able to do these on Wednesday again, which just for my own OCD tendencies will be better. That the show is called Wednesday I'm in love, and I'll actually post it on Wednesday. But anyway, picks of the week. So first up this week, yeah, I'll do this one, is Batman Superman World's Finest #1. This is written by Mark Waid and drawn by Dan Mora. And World's Finest was one of the first team books in superhero comics. It was Batman and Superman together, DC's two most popular characters. And I want to say they started it in the 40s. And they published it for years and years. And then, I'm not sure when the series ended. It definitely went through the 60s, I want to say. And then every now and again, whenever they will team Superman and Batman up, they'll call it World's Finest. Not always, but sometimes. There was a really good Superman-Batman title that Jeff Loeb wrote in the mid-aughts, I want to say, mid to late aughts, which I dropped eventually, but I bought for a few years. So it was a book I look forward to. Still one of my favorite DC stories. There's one where they meet a bunch of analogs for Marvel superheroes. And I think that, I don't know if it's the same arc, but around that same time they did an extended story with Bizarro and Bat-Zarro, who are two of my favorite villains. They're not heroes, they're fuck-ups. But this... Oh, yeah, so I haven't been reading a whole lot of DC books these days for the last few years, and the ones I do read tend to be the kind of more off the beaten path things, Swamp Thing, etc. I haven't read a major DC book since Christopher Priest stopped writing Justice League. Christopher Priest wrote Justice League for about a year. I think it was 2016 into 2017. And then he left, and then I haven't really read. I have, like, they did that Superman, Batman, The Authority team book, but I've read books with Superman and Batman in them, but I haven't read and I'm assuming this is going to be more like a title. Now, Batman already has like 9 titles right now, and I don't know how many Superman has, but it's not nearly as many. But it's Mark Waid, and Mark Waid is not only a very good writer, but he's particularly good when it comes to DC comics, because they're very much his passion. So I was like, yeah, when I saw this was coming out, I'm like, I'll give this a go. If it stinks, I'll drop it. It's not that big a whoop. But I think it'll be good. It's Waid, like I said. Also this week, The Reckoning War, Trial of the Watcher #1. This was my pick of the week, also for the shop. Written by Dan Slott and drawn by Javier Rodriguez, who's an incredible artist. In fact, I just saw Javier Rodriguez do something recently. Oh, I hope you couldn't see the reflection in my glasses, what that was. Javier Rodriguez, sorry. Thrill as an old man Google something. Just trying to remember what I saw him do recently. Oh, The Defenders, that's right. And I think did he work on Immortal Hulk? Yes. That was mostly Bennett. The most recent Defenders, though, is what Javier Rodriguez has done. Sorry, I'm a little spacey. I got such a headache. The Reckoning War is really heating up. To sort of thumbnail it, the Watchers are a race of alien beings, omniscient, and they were extremely advanced, and this is millions of years ago. They became extremely advanced technologically, and so they began bringing the gift of their technology to other planets and to other civilizations that hadn't evolved as far as or as quickly. But since no good deed goes unpunished, one of the alien species that they introduced all this technology to ended up becoming very warlike and, killed millions and blah blah blah. So that point, the Watchers said, "Well, we'll never interfere again. We're only going to watch, and we're going to record what's happening in every part of the universe or the multiverse." And Uatu here is the Watcher for Earth 616, and he's been a major character in Marvel Comics for in the 21st century a lot. Like he was introduced in the pages of the Fantastic Four. If I'm not mistaken, I could be mistaken, but I think his first appearance coincides with the first appearance of the Silver Surfer and Galactus. Don't hold me to that. But it's definitely been a thing, and I think I've mentioned as much before. Whenever they're doing an event and they really want to try to drive home how big it is, the Watcher will show up, and they'll be like, "Oh, okay, well now we know there's..." Because if the Watcher doesn't know what's going to happen, that means that it's a big deal. And the Reckoning War is very much centered around Uatu the Watcher, who is a much more popular character now that he has that What If TV show. So now, in the Reckoning War, all of these aliens whose name eludes me now are invading Earth, and they're there's all kinds of destruction going on all over the universe, and the Watchers are still like, we can't do nothing. And Uatu's like, this is our fault. We need to do something, and now he's on trial for it. So, good times. Good times, great oldies for Picks of the Week. Okay. I gotta do this so I can go make a dinner. So first up, we have Hit Me #1. And, it's not my favorite. Everything Krista has done that I've read, which is most of it, I want to say, always tremendous, always worth it. And this is no exception. It's just, of all the stuff, especially that she has done lately for AWA, it's not ringing my bell like the other ones. Redemption was, which I think she did 2 series with Deodato, was a post-apocalyptic Western, which is, I can always get behind that. It has Krista, I think, always writes, or mostly always writes, female protagonists. In Redemption there was. And then Bad Mother was not unlike what it sounds like. A suburban mom who finds herself suddenly going up against organized crime. Which that particular sort of fish out of water premise has been done before, certainly, but it was still really good. This one, I'm not that into, to be honest with you. So the protagonist is a sex worker who specializes in sadomasochism. Largely the she lets you hit her, so that means that she appeals to sadists. I always have trouble remembering which is which. And as so often happens in these sorts of stories, she finds herself in the middle of something much bigger than, she's embroiled in a much bigger conspiracy. This is all, I put it all on me, because even though I wouldn't go so far as to say I'm a prude, I've never quite understood mixing pain with sexual pleasure. It's just, it doesn't do it for me. I've never really had anybody sexually, try to inflict pain on me. But I tend to run pretty cishet. And I'm not big on inflicting it myself. But that's just me. It does, so that aspect doesn't really appeal to me very much. I also feel like the art is really good, but what I really missed was that this takes place in the 90s. Which I didn't realize until I got to the end and the back matter where Krista and the artist Priscilla Traits, I hope I'm saying that right, talk about how they said it in the 90s, and I was like, oh, I didn't pick up on that at all. I don't know why the 90s have become a thing to set your crime fiction stories in. But I think that's leaving me a little cold too. It feels like, well, I'll be honest, and I'm not accusing anyone, certainly not as august a personage as Krista Faust, but I feel like a lot of the time writers will set stories in the 90s because that was the last decade before cell phones became common. And cell phones, the presence of cell phones really will throw off your plot. Like it'll make things, you know what I mean? It'll make it so that you present your characters with a conflict that can be easily resolved with a cell phone, and that means you have to move it to the 90s. I don't know that that's what's happening here, but it's not. It doesn't. It's not. I'm not getting a 90s vibe off the work itself, so I don't know. It's not my thing. I'm gonna at least read the next issue to see how it goes, but if I would still highly recommend Redemption and Bad Mother, and really anything with Chris's name on it. It's another book I read this week, A Little Monsters #1. I have kind of a similar coolishness on it. It's Jeff Lemire and Dustin Nguyen, who have worked together before they worked on a book called Descender, which they followed up with Ascender, and now Little Monsters is a completely different book. It's more of a horror book, and it's not watercolored, which is, to me, was the most stark difference. All of Descender and Ascender were done in watercolors. This is more, I think he might use some watercolors, but it's really more a traditional pen and ink book. The problem with this one is that it's vampires. Like Redneck, I'm still really enjoying by Donny Cates and Lissandro. Can never remember his last name. This is also post-apocalyptic children vampires. I don't know. I think doing the post-apocalypse. It always rings twice. I'm very clever. The post-apocalypse, I feel, is still, and I'm saying this because I'm working on a novel set in sort of a post-apocalyptic setting. But the post-apocalypse as a setting still has juice in it, I feel like. There's still stuff you can do. And in a similar way to using the 90s, I've always felt anyway, that the reason writers tend to drift to the post-apocalyptic is because it's where you can do a Western, even though this is not a Western, but you can do Westerns, but you're not stuck in the 1800s. You can have technology and gosh wow stuff like that, whiz-bang stuff. This is not what you have in Little Monsters. Maybe that's why I'm not that interested in it. It just feels like, that's another thing, because you have What's the Furthest Place from Here, is another, there's no vampires in it, but it's another young post-apocalypse sort of story. So, like, watching children trying to find their way through the post-apocalypse, getting a little, I feel like I'm seeing it a lot. And then the vampire angle just doesn't, of all the monsters readily available to us in American culture, and I'm generally thinking of just whatever universal horror pictures were made in the 40s and 50s. Vampires are my if they were werewolves or mummies, I don't know nice mummy stories anymore, or Creatures from the Black Lagoon, I would be much more interested. But vampires, boy, I was a kid in the 90s when it seemed to me that vampires really made their big comeback. That just could be because I was young, and I don't know that. Vampires have had other eras, but the 90s vampire was this very Anne Rice sort of vampire. They all wore cravats. They were all very sexy and charming, and even like Coppola's Dracula, or Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula. it's all very overwrought and Victorian and just doesn't do anything for me. Again, none of that is going on here, but I'm just saying, as far as how I feel about vampires as a trope, that's what Interview with the Vampire is always the first thing that comes to my head, and all the dumb goth kids I went to high school with who thought they were vampires too, and I was like, no, you're a sophomore at Granite Hills. You're not a vampire. Look who's talking. Look who's telling somebody else what to do with their fantasy life. And then finally, Punisher #1, which I did really like, although I'm still very, very on the whole logo thing. Like, I feel like, and I was talking about this with my friend Alexander, and I explained to him the sort of socio-political reasons behind changing the Punisher's logo. And I really feel like it just means that eventually they'll bring his logo back, his original logo back, and then it'll be a big fanfare. But for the time being, he works for the Hand. He's not the leader of the Hand, as I kind of been saying. He is their High Slayer. So he's really into Rain and Blood. He's their main killer. He kills guys. And it's very Jason Aaron. We're introduced to a sort of a mob, a mafia called, what are they called? The Apostles. And look, anytime you put guys in suits with accoutrements from other eras, I'm always on board for that. If they were wearing lucha libre masks, or if they were wearing sombreros, or if they were wearing, why am I going Mexican with everything? If they were wearing like a knight's helmet, anything like that, I'm going to be into. So the Hand has recruited Frank Castle to be their main killer, their own saint of killers. And they are able to, because the Hand is not, they're not good guys, but they have something that Frank wants. And I can't say what it is without totally giving it away. Maybe in a little while, but it was good. It was good, fun, Punisher killing stuff. And it doesn't feel like it's going to be super 616y, like it'll still be kind of separate from a lot of the superheroics going on, which the Punisher has always kind of been. There have been times where the Punisher will figure into like Civil War, for example, or Civil War is in fact when they brought him back for the first time since the 90s, really. Yeah, there's a couple issues in Garth Ennis's run where he does fight Wolverine. It's very funny. But by and large, the Punisher's been kind of separate from, because his sort of killing policy doesn't jibe with a lot of the ethics in the Marvel Universe, but it's still accessible. If you've never read The Punisher before, you could jump in on this. And, I mean, that doesn't seem likely, but that you've never read The Punisher before, but that was Pixel last week. All right, I gotta go make dinner because I'm starving. I think it's make my headache go away. I ate breakfast and lunch. I don't understand.